Stop. Before you continue watching this video, understand something. There is a version of you that is secretly hoping you fail. It knows your excuses. It knows your weaknesses. It knows exactly how long you can stay disciplined before you return to your comfort zone. And the most dangerous part? That version of you is not your enemy. It's you. The version of you that wakes up tomorrow and says, "I'll start next week." The version that promises to change, then reaches for the phone. The version that gets excited about a new goal, works for a few days, gets uncomfortable, and quits. That version is waiting. Waiting for you to get tired. Waiting for motivation to disappear. Waiting for you to retreat into the same habits. Because it knows something you may not realize. If you keep behaving like the person you've always been, your future will look exactly like your past. There is a version of you right now that is waiting for you to fail. Not another person. Not your enemy. Not the people who doubted you. You. A version of you that knows exactly how you behave when things get difficult. It knows when you start making excuses. It knows when you stop showing up. It knows how quickly you abandon your goals when the excitement disappears. It knows your comfort zone. It knows your distractions. It knows the exact moment you usually quit. And the frightening part is this. That version of you doesn't need to destroy you. It only needs to convince you to remain the same. Because if you continue repeating yesterday's patterns, tomorrow doesn't need to be different. Your habits will create it for you. Every morning you wake up with two possible directions. One direction takes you toward the person you say you want to become. The other takes you back toward the person you've already been. And the second direction is easier. It requires no courage, no discomfort, no uncertainty. You already know the road. You already know the excuses. You already know the distractions. You already know how the story ends. That's why changing your life is so difficult. You aren't simply fighting your circumstances. You're fighting familiarity. You're fighting the version of yourself that has survived by doing what was comfortable. And that version doesn't want to disappear. It wants to keep you predictable, because predictable feels safe. But predictable can also become a prison. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it when I have more time. I'll start when I'm motivated. I just need to feel ready." And then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Next month becomes another year. Eventually, you look back and realize something terrifying. You weren't waiting for the right moment. You were waiting for your fear to disappear. And it never did. So here's the first truth you need to understand. You will never think your way into becoming a completely different person. You have to behave your way there. Your identity follows your actions, not the other way around. You don't become disciplined and then start acting disciplined. You start acting disciplined, and eventually your brain begins to believe, "This is who I am." That's how transformation happens. Not through one giant decision. Through hundreds of small decisions that contradict your old identity. The old version of you says, "Sleep a little longer." The new version gets up. The old version says, "You deserve a break." The new version finishes the work. The old version says, "Nobody will know." The new version remembers that you will know. And that's what matters. Because the battle is rarely between you and the world. Most of the time, the battle is between who you have been and who you are becoming. And every day you vote. Every action is a vote. Every skipped workout is a vote. Every hour wasted scrolling is a vote. Every time you keep a promise to yourself is a vote. Every time you do the difficult thing when nobody is watching is a vote. You are constantly voting for an identity. The problem is that most people don't realize how powerful these votes are. They think one lazy day doesn't matter. One missed opportunity doesn't matter. One excuse doesn't matter. And they're right. One doesn't matter. But repetition does. A single bad decision is an event. A repeated bad decision becomes a pattern. A pattern becomes a habit. A habit becomes an identity. And eventually that identity becomes a life. That's how people accidentally build lives they never consciously chose. Not through one catastrophic mistake. Through thousands of tiny compromises. That's why you need to interrupt the pattern. Not tomorrow. Not when life becomes easier. Now, look at your life honestly. Where do you keep repeating the same behavior? Where do you constantly promise yourself that you'll change? Where do you know exactly what you should be doing, but continue doing something else? That is where the old version of you is hiding. And you don't defeat that version through motivation. You defeat it through interruption. If you always wake up and immediately grab your phone, change the first 10 minutes of your morning. If you always quit when something becomes difficult, stay 5 minutes longer. If you always avoid starting because the task feels overwhelming, work for 10 minutes. If you constantly tell yourself that you don't have time, remove something from your schedule. You don't need to completely transform your life in one day. You need to prove to yourself that your old pattern is no longer in control. That's the beginning, because every time you break an old pattern, you weaken it. And every time you reinforce a new behavior, you strengthen the person you're becoming. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline means forcing yourself to suffer every second of the day. It doesn't. Discipline is simply the ability to keep your future more important than your temporary feelings. You won't always feel motivated. You won't always feel confident. You won't always feel inspired. Sometimes you'll feel exhausted. Sometimes you'll feel bored. Sometimes you'll question whether any of this is worth it. And that is exactly when your old identity will return. It will whisper, "See? This is too hard. Go back. You were happier before. You don't need this. You can try again later." But understand what is happening. Your old identity is not necessarily telling you the truth. It's protecting its territory. Your habits are comfortable because your brain knows them. The unknown feels dangerous, even when the unknown is better. That's why growth often feels wrong before it feels right. You're asking your mind to walk into territory it has never experienced. And your brain will often interpret uncertainty as danger. So don't wait until growth feels comfortable. Make discomfort familiar. Get used to doing things that challenge you. Get used to being a beginner. Get used to failing. Get used to hearing no. Get used to being misunderstood. Get used to working without applause. Get used to progress that nobody else can see. Because if you need constant validation to continue, someone else will always control your direction. You need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is one of the greatest advantages you can develop. Because once discomfort stops controlling you, your world expands. You can start the business. You can learn the skill. You can publish the work. You can walk away from the environment that keeps you small. You can rebuild yourself. Not because you're fearless, because fear no longer gets the final vote. But there's another enemy you need to confront: comparison. You look at someone else's success and suddenly your own progress feels meaningless. You see someone who is ahead of you, more successful, more confident, more experienced, and you start believing that you're behind. But you're comparing your beginning to somebody else's chapter 20. That's a losing game. Your real competition isn't the person on your screen. It's the person you were yesterday. Did you become slightly stronger? Did you become slightly more disciplined? Did you keep one more promise? Did you learn something? Did you take one step forward instead of retreating? That's the scoreboard. Because your goal isn't to become someone else. Your goal is to become a version of yourself that your current self would barely recognize. Imagine meeting yourself 5 years from now. What would that person think about the decisions you're making today? Would they thank you? Or would they ask, "Why did you keep waiting?" That's the confrontation. Not with your past, with your future. Because the future version of you is being built right now. Every hour, every choice, every habit, every sacrifice. You are constructing that person. And eventually you will meet them. The question is, who are you building? Someone who is stronger, more capable, more disciplined, more independent, or someone who looks back and realizes they spent years waiting for permission to begin. You don't need permission. You need a decision. And that decision has to be bigger than your current mood. There will be days when you don't want to work. Work anyway. There will be days when you don't believe in yourself. Move anyway. There will be days when progress seems invisible. Continue anyway, because the people who change their lives are not necessarily the people with the strongest motivation. They're the people who continue after motivation disappears. And eventually something changes. The thing that once required enormous effort becomes normal. Waking up early becomes normal. Training becomes normal. Learning becomes normal. Working becomes normal. Saying no becomes normal. Keeping promises becomes normal. And one day, you realize the person who used to make excuses isn't running your life anymore. You've outrun them. Not because you ran faster, because you stopped going backward. That's the real goal. You don't have to destroy your past. You have to stop obeying it. Your past can explain you. It does not have to control you. Maybe you've failed before. Maybe you've wasted time. Maybe you've made decisions you're ashamed of. Maybe you've started and quit more times than you can count. Fine. That chapter exists. But it doesn't get to write the next one. You do. And if you want a different life, you need different evidence. You need to show yourself that you're different. Not with words. With behavior. Keep the promise. Finish the workout. Make the call. Publish the project. Study the material. Wake up when you said you would. Put the phone down. Do the work. Again. And again. And again. Because confidence isn't something you wait for. Confidence is evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you create evidence. Every time you do something difficult, you create evidence. Every time you refuse to return to your old pattern, you create evidence. Eventually, you look at yourself and realize, I can trust me. That is powerful. Because once you trust yourself, you don't need constant motivation. You don't need someone standing behind you. You don't need someone reminding you what you're capable of. And when you move differently. You stop negotiating with every temporary emotion. You stop asking whether you feel like doing the work. You simply do what needs to be done. That's when evolution becomes inevitable. So tonight, confront the version of yourself that keeps waiting for you to fail. Look directly at the habits that are holding you back. The distractions, the excuses, the procrastination, the fear, the comfort, and make one decision. This pattern ends here. Not because you're suddenly perfect, because you're finally unwilling to keep betraying your potential. Tomorrow, you don't need to become a completely different person. Become 1% different. Wake up and make one better decision. Then another. Then another. Because one decision becomes a pattern. A pattern becomes an identity. And an identity becomes a destiny. The version of you that is waiting for you to fail has one major advantage. It already knows your old behavior. So become unpredictable. Change the routine. Break the pattern. Raise the standard. Do what the old you wouldn't do. And keep doing it until the old version of you has nowhere left to live. Because you cannot outrun your shadow by standing still. You cannot build a new life using the same habits that created the old one. And you cannot become your future self while constantly protecting your past self. At some point, you have to choose. Comfort or growth. Familiarity or possibility. Excuses or action. The person you've been, or the person you could become. Choose, then prove it. Not tomorrow, today. Because somewhere ahead of you is a version of yourself that is stronger, sharper, calmer, more disciplined, and more capable. That person is waiting, but they're not coming to save you. You have to become them. So get up, start again, break the pattern, keep the promise, and move. Because the only version of you that can stop the future version of you is the version standing here right now. And it's time to make sure that version doesn't quit. If this message hit you, don't just watch it and move on. Do something with it. Choose one habit you've been using to hold yourself back. And break that pattern today. Then come back to this video whenever the old version of you starts whispering that you should quit. And if you're serious about becoming a stronger version of yourself, subscribe. Because this channel is about one thing. Becoming the person you keep telling yourself you're capable of becoming. Your old self is waiting for you to quit. Don't give them the satisfaction. Start today. And don't look back. Your future self is built by what you do today. If you're serious about becoming stronger, more disciplined, more focused, and impossible to stop, don't just watch this video. Take action. Subscribe to the Growth Code for powerful motivation, discipline, mindset, self-improvement, and personal growth. Your old self is waiting for you to quit. Don't outrun it. Become better. Become stronger. Become the person you were meant to be.